everybody, welcome back to another Sparky lesson. Tonight we are going to be reading a storybook called Howard the Horrible Gets Even by Gary Richmond. Hi, I am Gary Richmond and I am a zookeeper. As a zookeeper, I've learned a lot about God's wonderful animals. At the same time, I've learned a lot about God. This true story is about a mean, dangerous ostrich I called Howard the Horrible. Now, zookeepers love animals, right? Well, that's true most of the time, but not all the time. I am an animal lover. After working at the zoo for 7 years, I can say this. I loved all of the animals some of the time. I loved some of the animals all of the time. But I didn't love all of the animals all of the time. Perhaps you're an animal lover. You might think you can love all animals all the time. If so, I know you've never met Howard the ostrich. If you met Howard once, you would know this. Some animals are like some people. They can be rude, ugly, gross, mean, and just plain old horrible. Now the ostrich is a huge bird with beautiful eyes. Why, you could hang your coat on one of their long, gorgeous eyelashes. But when you look deep into their eyes, you'll find that nobody's home. They seem to almost have no brains. Even the Bible says that ostriches are not smart. She steps on her eggs and breaks them. It does say, however, that she can run like the wind. Somehow, though, running fast does not excuse her carelessness. Birds should fly, don't you think? Now, God made over 10,000 different kinds of birds, and only 4 kinds of birds don't fly. The kiwi, the emu, the cassowary, and, you guessed it, the ostrich. I think God knew they weren't too smart, so he decided the world would be safer if these birds stayed on the ground. Howard was moved to my section of the zoo. He was too dangerous to his keeper in the main part. The keeper couldn't do his work because he was too busy fighting off Howard. You see, Howard weighed over 200 pounds. He could kill a man if he wanted to. In fact, Howard spent a lot of energy trying to hurt George, his keeper. I wasn't really excited about being Howard's new keeper either, but caring for the extra zoo animals was my job. I would take care of Howard until he was sold to another zoo. My senior keeper, Al Franklin, decided to help me. He would stand guard whenever I was cleaning and feeding in Howard's yard. I was glad to have Al there. When we went into Howard's area, he would begin a mating dance. He would crouch down and fan his wings out one at a time, and then he would rock back and forth. He acted as if Al and I were lady ostriches. We were not impressed, though, and this made Howard very angry, and that's when he would attack us. Most people don't know that ostriches are very dangerous. They have powerful legs with huge 3-inch toenails that can dig deep into a person's body. Al controlled Howard with a leaf rake. He put it under Howard's chin and made him back up. That way Al could keep Howard safely away from me while I cleaned the yard. It worked well. Several days went by without any problems. The bad days came when Al went on vacation. Being a bit proud, I didn't want to ask for help. George had never asked for help when he kept Howard, so I wouldn't get help either. Besides, I had a plan. Take charge, I thought. Show Howard who's boss. The first day Al was gone, I went into Howard's yard alone, and I ran at Howard with a rake as if I were attacking him. It surprised him, and he ran from me. The yard was huge, and I ran him all the way to the back of it. He paced back and forth nervously because there was nowhere else to run. "Listen to me, Howard," I said firmly. "We will do fine if you stay away from me." Then I was free to clean and feed the deer and pygmy goats. They shared the yard with Howard, but I kept my eye on him all the time, just in case. I wondered why George had such a terrible problem with Howard. I thought he should have just been more forceful. For a week, Howard kept his distance from me. If he didn't, he got a pointed rake reminder. That kept him in line. Finally, Howard decided he had enough of me. I don't know what made him change, but one day when I came to the yard, there he was. He was waiting at the gate so close that it was hard to open. He was looking at me as if I were a girlfriend. I had to push my way in, and then I put the rake under his chin and yelled, "Get back, Howard! We're not going to start this again." Howard pushed his neck against the rake, and then he surprised me by leaping and kicking in the air. The rake kept him a safe distance away. Soon Howard began to back up. I was feeling pretty much in control, so I backed him to the edge of the yard again. For good measure, I jabbed the rake toward Howard to threaten him. When I did, the end of the rake fell off. Howard and I both stared at it in surprise. Then we both came to the same conclusion. I was in trouble. Our eyes met for a moment. There was angry fire in Howard's eyes and fear in mine. Howard the Horrible's eyes narrowed. He was no longer a goofy-looking, flightless bird. He was a dragon, and I was a knight, a swordless knight without any armor. This dragon didn't know much, but he knew an unarmed knight when he saw one. Howard was not afraid anymore. Suddenly, he leaped high in the air toward me. He was kicking hard with his giant toenails. He barely missed me. When he landed, I could feel the ground shake beneath my feet. My heart was beating like a rapid-fire machine gun. I turned and ran as fast as I could. I made about 10 yards while he was recovering from his leap. Then he began to chase me. An ostrich can run as fast as a racehorse, so Howard began catching up very quickly. 50 yards away in the middle of the yard was a large metal hay feeder. The feeder was about 30 feet from the gate. I had to make it to the hay feeder. If not, Howard would surely kick me to death. I knew it, and so did he. I ran with all my might, straining every muscle in my legs. I leaned forward to get as much speed as possible, and I made it to the hay feeder. I grabbed it and made a quick turn. Howard was on one side, I on the other. I was trembling, and my legs were weak and wobbly. Our eyes met again, and Howard stared at me. He had the look of a hunter. I was his prey. He began to stalk me slowly around and around the hay feeder. My heart was pounding harder than ever. I knew we couldn't keep this up forever, so I began to stare at the gate. Could I run 30 feet, pull up the latch, and shut the gate before Howard the Horrible could come and get me? Meanwhile, we kept circling the hay feeder. Finally, Howard stopped and pretended to give up the chase and looked away. I knew that this was a way for him to try and trap me, so I decided to fake a run for the gate. Howard was out of the chute like a rocket after me. "Fooled you, Howard," I said. "You'll have to do better than that to catch me." We circled the feeder again. Then Howard saw some grain on the ground that he had to peck at it. I wasn't sure, but I thought he forgot about me. He was on one side of the feeder, and I was on the side where the gate was. I decided that now was the time to make a run for it. I pushed off the feeder. I knew I had better be right. I had run about 10 feet before Howard turned. When he did, he was quick. I grabbed the gate and looked back. Howard the Horrible was chasing me at full speed. His eyes looked like raging fires. I yanked up the latch and backed up slightly to get the gate open. I jumped around the gate just as Howard ran into it, knocking it shut. For good measure, he jumped and kicked the fence, and it shook under the force of his blow. Howard stomped around nervously for several minutes. He was daring me to come back into the yard. I knew I couldn't let Howard get away with this. No one would be safe in this yard again. So I found another zookeeper and explained the problem. I asked him if he would clean the yard while I took control of Howard again. He knew how mean Howard was and how dangerous, so he was glad to help. We both took shovels and rakes. I pulled hard on the end of my rake. I wanted to be sure it would not fall off this time. We stepped into the yard, and Howard was on us like a tick on a hound. But I was ready for him. I put the rake under his chin and pushed. I kept a safe distance. In a few minutes, I had Howard moving wherever I wanted him to go. I didn't hurt him, I just showed him who was boss. That way, we could safely care for Howard and his yard mates. I never went into Howard's yard alone again. All I had to do was ask for help until our return. Everyone was glad to say yes. They knew they might need this kind of help sometime too. When I think about it today, life has always been a little like a zoo. Some people remind me of Howard the Horrible. Don't you know some people who are not very nice to be around? Well, guess what? God teaches us to be kind even to people who are mean. You see, I could have been mean to Howard, or I could have hurt him for chasing me. But then I would have been just as bad as Howard. The best thing for me to do was this: let Howard know I would not go along with his mean tricks, but I would still be his friend and take care of him. The next time you meet someone like Howard the Horrible, be nice to them. But don't go along with the bad things they do. After all, that's what Jesus did. When his enemies hurt him, he just loved them back. He even offered to save them, and still does today. Don't you want to be like Jesus? Romans 12:21 says this: "Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good." I hope that you enjoyed tonight's Sparky lesson. I cannot wait to see you next week.